In the quiet corridors of a suburban home where love was promised and trust was sacred, something far darker was taking shape. A husband, devoted and unaware, began to notice the subtle changes: phone calls taken in hushed tones, laughter that no longer reached his ears, and nights spent waiting alone. At first, they seemed like the inevitable strains of a long marriage. But as days turned into weeks, the questions gnawed at him, questions he didn't yet know would lead him into a labyrinth of betrayal, heartbreak, and devastating truths. This is the story of a woman who chose to betray not once, but 5 times. A web of infidelity so tangled that it left her husband, their family, and an entire community questioning everything they thought they knew. And yet, the most haunting revelations were still to come. Behind closed doors, hidden in encrypted messages, and buried in a trail of deceit, the truth waited to be uncovered. What you are about to hear is more than just a tale of broken vows. It is a chilling account of deception, the manipulation of emotions, and the unraveling of lives in ways no one could have foreseen. By the end of this story, you'll see that even in the safest neighborhoods, betrayal can fester behind the most unassuming doors. But when the truth finally surfaced, it wasn't just a marriage that lay in ruins. It was an entire reality shattered into pieces. Our story begins in a picturesque suburban neighborhood, a place where manicured lawns and picket fences spoke of stability and success. It was here that David and Laura Henderson built their life. David, a diligent and kind-hearted man, worked tirelessly to provide for his family. Laura, his wife of 15 years, was vibrant and outgoing, adored by neighbors and admired for her charisma. To their 2 children in the outside world, they appeared to have everything: a comfortable home, loving parents, and a bond that seemed unshakable. Friends described them as the perfect couple, a pair who navigated life's challenges with grace and unity. But what no one knew, not even David, was that beneath this idyllic surface, Laura was hiding secrets that would ultimately unravel everything. David Henderson, like so many in his position, never imagined that betrayal could creep into his home. But as he would soon discover, love is not always enough to protect against the choices others make. And in Laura's case, those choices would set in motion a chain of events that no one could stop. This is not just a story of infidelity. It's a story of manipulation, heartbreak, and the haunting question: what drives someone to betray everything they once claimed to hold dear? To truly understand this story, we must first step back in time to when everything seemed picture perfect. A time when David and Laura Henderson were not just a couple, but a beacon of love and stability for those around them. David Henderson was the kind of man everyone admired, a devoted husband and father. With a warm demeanor and a reputation for hard work, David's life revolved around providing for his family. As a skilled architect, he spent countless hours designing homes for others, always dreaming of a future where he could finally slow down and enjoy the home he had built for his own family. "David is one of the most dependable people I've ever met," said a colleague who had worked alongside him for over a decade. "He was the guy you could always count on, whether it was for a late-night deadline or a word of advice." Laura, on the other hand, was the life of the party. With her effortless charm and magnetic personality, she quickly became a beloved figure in the community. PTA meetings, neighborhood bake sales, charity events. Laura was there, always willing to lend a helping hand. Friends described her as someone who could light up any room she entered. Together, they were a team. In their early years of marriage, David and Laura seemed inseparable. They celebrated milestones, raised 2 wonderful children, and built a life that others envied. "They were just perfect," said one family friend. Laura adored David, and he worshipped her. You could see it in the way they looked at each other. But perfection is often the mask we wear, isn't it? Beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. Cracks that would eventually shatter the illusion. In a place where everyone knew everyone, the Hendersons were the golden couple. Neighbors often spoke of how they set the standard for what a marriage should look like. "David was always so polite," one neighbor recalls. "He'd wave every morning when he left for work. And Laura, She was the glue of our block. She organized potlucks, helped babysit, even ran errands for the elderly. It's hard to imagine anyone saying a bad word about them. "You never really know what's going on behind closed doors, do you?" said another neighbor, shaking their head. Looking back, maybe there were signs, but at the time, they seemed perfect. At first glance, theirs was a story of love and partnership, but as we dig deeper, it becomes clear that appearances can be deceiving. What the neighbors didn't see, what even David failed to notice, was the slow unraveling of the life they had built together. The cracks in the facade weren't just small, they were chasms, hidden just below the surface. The question remains, how does a marriage that once seemed unbreakable fall apart so completely? And why did Laura make the choices she did? The answers lie in what happened next, a tale of betrayal that would leave everyone reeling. In every relationship, trust is the foundation upon which everything else is built. But for David Henderson, it was as if that foundation was beginning to shift, ever so slightly. Subtle changes in Laura's behavior began to tug at the edges of his mind, raising questions he wasn't ready to answer. It started with late nights. Laura, who had always been punctual, now had a pattern of coming home later than usual, offering vague explanations about meetings running over or helping a friend in need. David wanted to believe her, but something didn't feel right. "He mentioned it to me once," said James, David's best friend since college. "Nothing serious, just a casual comment about how Laura was always busy. I told him he was probably overthinking it, but looking back, maybe he wasn't." Then there were the phone calls. Laura, who had always been open with David, now seemed guarded. Her phone, once left carelessly on the coffee table, was now glued to her side, locked with a new passcode David didn't know. Calls became hushed whispers behind closed doors, messages typed with urgency, and laughter that didn't feel shared. And then there was the anniversary. What should have been a celebration of their love turned into an evening of confusion and disappointment. Laura had called hours before they were supposed to meet, her voice rushed and apologetic. "Something came up," she said. She promised to make it up to him, but the damage was done. These moments, isolated on their own, could have been explained away, but together they formed a pattern, one David could no longer ignore. One evening, while balancing the monthly finances, David noticed something strange. A series of charges on their credit card he couldn't account for. Spa treatments, expensive dinners at restaurants he had never been to, and a hotel reservation in a city Laura claimed to have never visited. "He came to work one day visibly upset," said a colleague. "He didn't say much, just that he thought something was off with Laura. I told him to trust his gut. Something wasn't adding up." And then there were the messages. Late one night, curiosity got the better of him. As Laura showered, David picked up her phone, a decision he would later describe as both a relief and a regret. What he saw confirmed his worst fears. Texts filled with affectionate words, heart emojis, and details of encounters he couldn't fathom. David didn't confront Laura immediately. Instead, he began to investigate quietly, piecing together the fragments of a truth he didn't want to believe. He followed her once, his heart pounding in his chest. What he saw shook him to his core. Laura laughing and smiling with a man he had never met, her demeanor so different from the distant, distracted woman she had become at home. David knew he needed answers, but how far would he have to go to uncover the full extent of Laura's betrayal? And what would he do once he had them? With every passing day, David's suspicions deepened. What started as isolated incidents had now grown into an undeniable pattern, a puzzle with too many missing pieces. But David was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. It began with a closer look at the evidence he had at hand. Receipts for lavish meals Laura claimed were work dinners, unfamiliar names on her phone, and social media posts that didn't align with the stories she told. David started to see a timeline, a series of coincidences that could no longer be ignored. The details didn't just raise questions, they gave David answers. an expensive dinner for two the same night she said she was visiting her sister, a spa weekend booked during a time she claimed to be on a business trip. The inconsistencies were glaring. He was like a man possessed, James recalled. He wasn't eating, barely sleeping. He just kept saying, "I have to know for sure." Realizing he couldn't do it alone, David sought help. He hired a private investigator, someone with the experience and resources to uncover what David could not. It was a decision he made reluctantly, knowing that what they found could change everything. The investigator wasted no time. Surveillance photos, phone records, and even interviews with people who knew Laura began to paint a clearer picture, one that confirmed David's worst fears. Laura wasn't just involved with one man. There were 5. Each connection more brazen than the last, and each betrayal cutting deeper into the life David thought they shared. David decided to confront one of them. It wasn't anger that drove him, it was desperation for answers. What he found, however, was more than he bargained for. The man, a coworker of Laura's, was caught off guard, but didn't deny the relationship. Instead, he revealed that Laura had painted a very different picture of her marriage, one where David was distant, controlling, and inattentive. It was a lie David couldn't fathom. She was skilled at manipulation, said the investigator. She knew how to play the victim, making herself seem sympathetic to these men while keeping them in the dark about each other. But it wasn't just the affairs that stunned David. It was the depth of Laura's deception. She had created an entirely separate life, complete with secret bank accounts, a rented apartment, and even plans to leave David entirely. In a box tucked away at the back of their shared closet, David found what could only be described as an escape plan: a rental agreement for an apartment in the city, fake IDs with different names, and correspondence with one of the men about starting over. It's not uncommon for someone leading a double life to construct an exit strategy, said Dr. Karen Lopez, a forensic psychologist. For Laura, it appears she was preparing for a future that didn't include David. David now had a choice: confront Laura with what he knew, or wait for her to reveal the truth herself. What happened next would leave their community in shock. The discovery of one affair was devastating enough, but as the pieces fell into place, David found himself facing an unthinkable truth. Laura wasn't just unfaithful. She had woven an intricate web of deceit involving 5 different men. Each relationship overlapped, each affair more audacious than the last. The timeline of Laura's affairs painted a staggering picture of betrayal. It began innocently enough: an after-work drink with a colleague, friendly texts with an old friend. But these harmless interactions soon escalated into something far more sinister. Affair 1. The colleague. The first affair started at her workplace. John, the senior manager, had always been charming and attentive. Their after-hours conversations turned into dinners and, soon after, secret weekends away. Affair 2. The neighbor. The second man lived just down the street. Mark, a recently divorced father of 2, described their connection as unexpected. He claimed Laura often came by to check on him during his rough patch, but their relationship quickly crossed boundaries. Affair 3. The trainer. "I thought the late-night gym sessions were about getting in shape," David admitted. "I had no idea she was meeting someone there." Affair 4. Her fourth relationship involved a man from her past, an old flame from high school she reconnected with on social media. Their exchanges started innocently, reminiscing about old times, but it wasn't long before they were meeting in secret. The final affair was perhaps the most brazen. Laura's business partner, Daniel, traveled frequently with her for work. Their professional relationship provided the perfect cover for their illicit encounters. Each affair was carefully compartmentalized, with Laura juggling her deceit so masterfully that none of the men suspected the others. Perspectives from friends and family. She always seemed so happy and confident, her sister shared. But now, looking back, there were little signs. Times she was distant or overly defensive about her phone. Reactions from the affair partners. "I thought we had something real," Mark admitted, "but then I found out about the others. She wasn't who I thought she was." One of the men, upon discovering Laura's lies, decided to confront her. What followed was an explosive argument that left both parties questioning everything they thought they knew. Despite the overwhelming betrayal, David wasn't ready to give up. He suggested therapy, believing that professional help might salvage their marriage. He planned surprise date nights, wrote heartfelt letters, and tried to reignite the spark they once shared. But Laura's response was far from what David had hoped. In therapy, she minimized her actions, shifting blame onto David, claiming he was too focused on work or that their marriage had grown stale. Her words cut deeper than any affair. It wasn't just the infidelity. It was the refusal to take responsibility, the gaslighting, the manipulation. David found himself questioning his own reality. In situations of serial infidelity, said Dr. Elaine Carter, a relationship counselor, the unfaithful partner often deflects blame as a defense mechanism. For the betrayed spouse, this can make the emotional damage even harder to heal. As David grappled with his crumbling marriage, the weight of Laura's betrayals began to take its toll. But the revelations weren't over. What came next would shock even the most seasoned investigators. For months, David had endured suspicion, deceit, and betrayal. He'd pieced together fragments of Laura's double life, but the day he uncovered undeniable proof of her infidelity with not just one, but 5 men, was the day everything unraveled. The breaking point came on a cold December evening. David had been compiling evidence, cryptic credit card charges, suspicious text messages, and photos that didn't add up. But the final piece of the puzzle came when he discovered a folder hidden on Laura's laptop. What he found left no room for doubt. Messages detailing secret rendezvous, photographs of intimate moments, and even receipts for gifts she had purchased for the other men. It was a betrayal on a scale he could barely comprehend. David confronted Laura that same night, unable to hold back the tidal wave of anger and pain. Their once quiet home became the stage for an explosive argument that echoed through the neighborhood. "How could you do this to us?" David demanded, his voice breaking. "To me? To our family?" "You've been so busy with work, David," she countered. "You left me feeling alone. What did you expect?" But as David pressed further, Laura's facade began to crumble. Tears turned to anger, and accusations flew both ways. She admitted to the affairs, each confession like another dagger to David's heart. "I heard yelling," said a neighbor who lived 2 doors down. "It was unlike anything I'd ever heard from them. The whole street knew something big was happening." The decision to separate. The argument ended not with resolution, but with resignation. For David, there was no repairing what had been broken. The next morning, he made the painful decision to leave the home they had built together. Husband files for divorce. Within days, David filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Friends and family rallied around him, but the emotional toll was immense. Wife's reaction. Laura's reaction was complicated. In private, she expressed remorse to some friends, admitting she had made mistakes. To others, she painted herself as the victim, blaming David for being emotionally unavailable. Her attempts to reconcile were inconsistent. At times, she promised to change, to work on the marriage. But when met with David's unwavering resolve, she shifted tactics, pleading one moment, lashing out the next. She tried to manipulate him, David's friend recalled. She wanted him to stay, but only because she didn't want to face the consequences. It wasn't about love anymore. It was about control. The decision to separate marked the end of their marriage, but it wasn't the end of the story. As the legal proceedings unfolded, new revelations would come to light, secrets that would send shockwaves through the community and forever alter the lives of everyone involved. After the dust had settled from the explosive confrontation and the subsequent separation, the reality of David and Laura's fractured marriage began to take shape in the form of a bitter and public legal battle. In the months that followed, what had begun as a private affair between husband and wife transformed into a legal spectacle that would capture the attention of their entire community. The divorce proceedings were nothing short of a battleground, with both parties fighting tooth and nail for their stake in the life they had once shared. The first major hurdle was custody of the children. David, determined to provide a stable environment for his kids, sought full custody. He cited Laura's infidelity as a reason for her unfitness as a mother. But Laura wasn't about to go down without a fight. She hired a team of high-powered attorneys and argued that she was a loving and capable mother despite her personal mistakes. In cases like this, custody battles can be incredibly complicated, said a family law attorney. Even if one parent is found guilty of infidelity, it's not always a deciding factor in custody. Courts tend to focus on the child's best interests. But the public nature of the case certainly played a role in the decision-making process here. The division of assets also became a contentious issue. David fought to secure his fair share of the couple's joint property, homes, investments, and savings, but Laura fought back, claiming she was entitled to a portion of the wealth they had built together. She argued that David's excessive work hours had neglected their marriage, thus justifying her affairs. The back and forth over their financial settlement seemed endless. As the legal battle continued, it became clear that both sides had their own version of the truth, and neither was willing to back down. In the midst of it all, their once private lives were now laid bare for public scrutiny. But that scandal may be considered the lowest point in the Trump administration, because that was where the breakthrough in foreign policy came for everyone. The scandal was impossible to ignore. The case was covered extensively by the local media, with sensationalized headlines casting Laura as the villain of the story. Her once celebrated status in the community as a friendly, loving wife and mother began to crumble as every detail of her infidelities came to light. "Did you hear about Laura?" one neighbor whispered. 5 men. 5. And she was fooling everyone. I always thought she had something strange going on, but I never imagined it would be this bad. As the public unraveling of Laura's double life continued, the community's perception of the couple, and especially of Laura, shifted dramatically. Once admired for her charm and bubbly personality, Laura now found herself the subject of gossip and judgment from those she had once considered friends. "At first I couldn't believe it," one neighbor said. "We've known Laura for years. She was always so sweet, so friendly. But when the truth came out, it was like a slap in the face. I felt like I didn't even know her anymore." "How could she do this to him?" one woman asked. "They were the perfect couple. We all looked up to them." Even at work, Laura's reputation began to take a hit. While some colleagues tried to distance themselves from the scandal, others couldn't help but gossip. In a small office, everyone knew everyone else's business. "I don't even know what to say," the former colleague admitted. "She was always so put together, always talking about her family. And now it just feels like a lie. It's hard to look at her the same way." As the weeks passed, Laura's standing in the community continued to erode. People who had once celebrated her were now quick to condemn her. The 5 men involved in the affairs weren't just names on a list. They represented shattered trust, broken friendships, and a family left in tatters. Laura's once coveted position within the community was gone. Her social circles shrank, and her every move was scrutinized. Where she had once been admired for her charm, she was now viewed through the lens of betrayal. As for David, he found himself caught in the crossfire. Though many rallied behind him, offering support in the wake of the betrayal, he too was affected by the public fallout. The scandal had stained both their names, forever changing the way they were seen by the people they had once trusted. Just when it seemed that the worst of the drama had passed, the investigation into Laura's affairs took a sharp and unexpected turn. What appeared to be a simple case of infidelity soon unraveled into something far more sinister. As the legal battle continued, a new layer of deception came to light, one that would leave everyone reeling. While David and Laura's bitter divorce played out in public view, behind the scenes, a team of private investigators continued to dig deeper into Laura's actions. They had uncovered plenty about her extramarital activities, but what they didn't expect was the sinister web she had woven beyond the affairs themselves. At first, the private investigators' team noticed discrepancies in the couple's financial records. Laura, it seemed, wasn't just spending money on luxurious gifts for her lovers. There was evidence pointing to something more. Credit card statements, unexplained transfers, and mysterious withdrawals began to surface, suggesting that Laura had been funneling money out of their joint accounts for months, perhaps longer. "It doesn't add up," said one investigator as they pored over Laura's spending habits. "These aren't just the occasional purchases for herself. We're talking about large sums disappearing, accounts being manipulated. Someone's covering their tracks." "It's not uncommon for people involved in infidelity to hide their spending habits," explained a financial analyst. "But what we see here, these types of transactions, they point to potential financial fraud. This is beyond just poor money management." As the investigators dug further, they began to uncover a pattern of manipulation within Laura's relationships with the 5 men. It was clear that these affairs were not just about infidelity or fleeting passions. Laura had skillfully manipulated these men, each for her own personal gain. "She knew how to play them," said one of the men, now willing to speak to authorities. "At first it seemed innocent, but then I realized she was always asking for money. Small loans at first, but they kept adding up. She would convince him that she needed a little help, something small, only to come back with another request a week later. It wasn't long before I realized that I was just another man in a long line of people she'd been using for financial support," explained one of the men who had been manipulated by Laura during their affair. The true extent of her manipulation became clearer. Laura had been carefully orchestrating a web of dependence, using her charm and calculated behavior to extract money, favors, and influence from each man she encountered. But this wasn't just about affairs and money. In a startling development, investigators discovered that Laura had been involved in several illicit activities tied to her affairs, some of which had the potential to unravel even further than anyone could have imagined. "She was involved with some pretty shady characters," said one of Laura's lovers, now cooperating with investigators. "I didn't think anything of it at the time. She was always so charming, so convincing. But when I look back, I realize she was involved in things that weren't legal. I didn't want to get caught up in it, so I walked away." The deeper investigators dug, the more they began to suspect that Laura had not only been manipulating men for money, but also using them to facilitate some sort of larger criminal activity. The web of deceit and betrayal was expanding beyond simple affairs. But it wasn't until a breakthrough in the investigation that everything truly fell into place. After a thorough examination of Laura's financial records and emails, investigators uncovered an account that had been carefully hidden from everyone, including her own husband. And that's when investigators found the hidden bank account. Under an alias she had carefully cultivated, Laura had been secretly funneling large sums of money into this account for years. The account, which had been used to conceal her financial transactions and criminal activities, held enough money to indicate that Laura had been involved in something far darker than just infidelity. What's more, the account revealed payments that seemed to be linked to illegal activities, payments that had no clear explanation. The funds were often transferred in small, seemingly innocent amounts, but when viewed in their entirety, they painted a chilling picture. It was as if she had been preparing for this moment all along, hiding behind layers of deception, manipulating everyone, friends, family, lovers, and even the law. As the investigators connected the dots, it became increasingly clear. Laura's life was not just a series of illicit affairs. It was a carefully constructed scheme designed to profit from deceit and exploitation. With this discovery, everything changed. Laura was no longer just the unfaithful wife. She was a criminal who had built an empire on manipulation, deception, and exploitation. And as the truth unraveled, so did the last remnants of her carefully constructed facade. As the dust settled and the courtroom drama finally came to an end, David found himself looking back on a chapter of his life he never could have imagined. The betrayal, the deceit, and the shattered trust had all taken their toll. But as time passed, David began the difficult journey of rebuilding his life. The sounds of birds chirping softly in the background, The pain of discovering his wife's multiple affairs was a blow David never anticipated. For months, he could hardly make sense of it. How could someone he loved, someone he trusted, betray him in such a profound way? Both were dying for more than what they had. It wasn't just the affairs that hurt. It was the lies, the complete disregard for everything we'd built together. I never saw it coming, but eventually I realized I had two choices. I could let this destroy me, or I could learn from it and move forward. David's path to emotional recovery wasn't easy. Therapy, long conversations with trusted friends, and, most importantly, his own introspection helped him heal. Slowly, the anger gave way to acceptance. He understood that his worth wasn't defined by the betrayal he'd suffered. Now, with the help of those around him, David has found a sense of peace. He's moved on from the pain, but he carries the lessons learned from this betrayal into every relationship and decision he makes moving forward. The pain may never truly go away, but it has shaped him into someone stronger, wiser, and more resilient. The impact of Laura's actions stretched far beyond her own family. The scandal shocked the community, leaving many to question the nature of the relationships they thought they knew. When we heard the truth about what had happened, it felt like the ground beneath us shifted, one neighbor said. Laura was always so friendly, always had a smile on her face. To think that someone could be hiding something so dark, it makes you question everyone around you. They may look perfect. For the children, the impact was especially devastating. Growing up in a family that appeared perfect, they now had to navigate the aftermath of a broken home, torn apart by betrayal. What was once a picture of suburban bliss had been irreversibly altered, and the damage would last far longer than anyone had anticipated. The community, once supportive, now found themselves divided. Some continued to rally behind David, offering him a shoulder to lean on. Others struggled to reconcile the image of the woman they once admired with the reality of her deceit. At the heart of this tragedy lies a truth that many are reluctant to face. Trust is fragile, and betrayal comes with a cost far beyond the people directly involved. In this episode, evolution of personal repair with people. Shattered glass, symbolizing broken trust. What Laura's actions have shown is that deceit, no matter how well concealed, will eventually surface. And when it does, it doesn't just destroy the person who has been betrayed. It impacts families, communities, and everyone who's ever been touched by the lie. What I've learned is that trust is something that should never be taken lightly. Once it's broken, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. But if we don't learn from these painful experiences, we risk repeating the same mistakes. Betrayal doesn't just harm the person you hurt. It harms everyone around you. And the cost of that is immeasurable. In the end, this story is about more than just a wife who cheated. It's about the human cost of dishonesty, the toll it takes on the soul, the family, and the community. Trust is precious. Once lost, it can never be fully restored. But through recovery, reflection, and time, even the deepest wounds can begin to heal. This has been a story of betrayal, a story of deception, and a story of resilience. Thank you for watching. As we look back on this shocking tale of betrayal, deception, and shattered trust, we are reminded of the fragile nature of the relationships we hold dear. David's life was forever altered the moment he uncovered the truth about his wife's multiple affairs. The perfect facade they had built together crumbled before his eyes, leaving nothing but the remnants of a marriage once thought to be unbreakable. The web of lies unraveled in such a way that even the most unsuspecting members of their community were left stunned. The discovery of 5 different men, the hidden truths, the manipulation, it all came to light in the most unexpected ways. And just when it seemed the story could not take another twist, new evidence emerged, further complicating the narrative and revealing a deeper, darker side to the woman he once loved. But amidst the chaos and heartache, there was one truth that remained constant. The emotional scars of betrayal run deep, and they last far longer than any secret can remain hidden. End of prologue by Tajina A. Pearson. No matter the resolution, no matter how time passes, the consequences of such deceit are impossible to erase. In the end, the truth may set you free, but the scars of betrayal last a lifetime. If this story shocked you as much as it shocked us, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more gripping true crime documentaries. We'd love to hear your thoughts and theories about this case, so leave a comment below and join the conversation. Thank you for watching. Until next time, remember, the truth always finds a way to surface, no matter how deep it's buried.